Hello everyone and welcome to a video about Altiplano. I'm going to share a brief overview of the game and then I will do some ranking afterwards. Altiplano is a bag building game where you are basically collecting resources that essentially produce resources of that type each turn that then allow you to purchase more resources with what you produce. So as an example here, in this setup, I start with a couple food, a fish, and a wood, and when it's my turn, my current pull size is 4, so I'm going to pull 4 resources from my bag. Well, I start with 4. These would all be in my bag. I pull all 4 out, stick them on my board, and then I get to choose, with these produced resources, what I do with them. I might send this food over here to produce some money. I might send this food over here with this fish to produce yet another food. And I might stick this wood over here on hold. I can't really spend it yet, but once I get some stone here, then I could move up on this track. So the idea behind this game is you're spending resources to gain resources. Here I would spend this food, plop it in the box, get another coin. Here I spend my food and fish, plop them in the box, collect a food. At any point when my bag is empty, I dump whatever is in my little food bin into the bag, mix it up, and then on my next round I'll be pulling 4 more. That's the gist of how the game plays. There are many different resources, there are many different ways you can score points. This little track here shows you a little bit how you score points. Several resources will be worth points at the end of the game based on which resource they are. You'll be able to take actions that let you collect a canoe, which will be worth 2 points and will give you 1 resource of your choice. You always get to choose which one you take. Or you can collect buildings, which will give you 1 point per type of resource you have. So if I have 7 wood, this gives me 7 points plus it's 4. Then we have contracts. You'll be able to collect contracts throughout the game, and if you can fulfill them, you will collect points and corn. Other things you can do in the game include storing resources for points. A full row of resources awards you points. And the other big piece of how this game works is you've got a worker out here, and you spend a wagon movement to go up to 3 spaces, and based on the location you're at with this little icon, that'll determine what kind of actions you're allowed to take there. So in your turn, you'll move your worker if you want to, and then take an action. And then it's the next player's turn, and as soon as everybody passes, then you go to the next round, draw new resources from your bag, and so on. Last thing over here to mention is that you can purchase tiles throughout the game. These tiles will give you new ways that you can produce resources, usually for easier, or there are other miscellaneous bonuses. I'll mention a couple. One of them is at the end of the round, you can actually pull a resource from your bin instead of your bag. If you have a resource you want to repeat, that's amazing. And another one is you can have an extra storage slot up here for a resource that can be used toward any action each round. So that's another really great ability. Another thing I want to mention too is Altiplano is very similar to the game Orleans. I haven't actually played Orleans, but the way that a friend described it to me is Altiplano is like Orleans if you gave it just a little bit more oomph. So my friend liked Orleans a little bit less and Altiplano a little bit more. So that's the gist of how the game plays and a little bit about Altiplano. So I'm going to go ahead and rank Altiplano now, and I'm very interested to see what you guys think, if you feel like you would rank it similar or maybe different. For agency and control, I give Altiplano an 8. There is quite a bit of control that you have in this game. The only luck in this game really comes down to what chips you have in your bag. You know, what do I have in my bag versus how many am I pulling? Everything else is up to you. You're purchasing the type of resources you want. And yes, in the beginning of the game, there are resources you can't collect because you don't have the right things to produce it yet. But of course, that all comes with strategy and time, and by the end of the game, you have complete control over what you're doing. Your only luck is what's coming out of your bag. For balance, I give Altiplano a 9. I feel like the game is very tight. Usually when somebody wins this game by a landslide, it's because they have a really sound strategy and have played the game really well. Another thing that helps the game feel pretty balanced is the resources that are placed out in the beginning of the game are set with limits. You'll see on this tile here, I'll hold this up. On here you'll see that depending on player count, you'll have different amounts of resources that will come out. The game end is triggered when the last tile in these stacks is placed out here, or when one of these locations is out of resources and cards. So if this is completely empty, no additional wagon spots or cards, game's over. If these are empty, game's over. So the game does feel very balanced with the way that the game end is triggered, as well as throughout the game things feel pretty balanced, pretty tight. For components, I give Altiplano a 7. I really want to give it an 8 or a 9 because there are some really fun components here, really fun elements. I mean, the alpaca here is a lot of fun, but you'll notice, I don't know how well you'll see this on camera, but the cardboard kind of is starting to wear. I have played this game probably 7 or 8 times, and a lot of the cardboard is wearing. These bins kind of get flimsy over time as well. This one actually is in better condition than 4 or 5 of my other ones, but you might even be able to tell on camera this thing's kind of starting to wear, and some of the time during setup these bins don't hold. They might stay together about like that. So while they did some fun stuff with these little bins, they aren't really built strong. They're not going to last for very long. But you could always 3D print that if that's something that you're interested in. Pretty much all the remaining components are cardboard, tiles or boards, and the bags. For crunchiness, I give Altiplano a 9. The game feels very tight and very crunchy the whole game through. In the beginning of the game, you are very limited on what choices you can make, and those choices are going to lead to what you can do in the game. And oftentimes it does feel like, hey, what do I want to give up so that I can have this other thing? There are several different resources that I'm always trying to collect as I play, and usually I can only end up with 1 or 2 out of maybe 3 or 4 that I'm going for. And so there's always these tight, crunchy decisions to make that keeps the game very interesting and keeps me engaged. The last bit that I would talk about with crunchiness is when you have a strategy or a goal in mind, it usually will take you half to 2/3 of the game to see that realized. And that makes the game really crunchy, really tight, and for me that makes it pretty fun. For ease of learning, I actually give Altiplano another 9. While there is kind of a lot going on in the game, it really does pick up pretty easy. For the weight that this game is, I feel like it's not too difficult to pick up. The concept is the same no matter what action you're taking. The concept is very similar. You're either using resources to get more resources, or you're using resources to collect a card. And people seem to pick up on the game pretty well. For interesting decisions, I give Altiplano an 8. There always is this kind of push and pull for, hey, what resource do I want to give? What do I not want to collect? Certain decisions early on can really change the game for you. In my current setup, I have an easy way to collect money, much easier than other players, and that might give me an advantage out here, and depending on what tiles I purchase early on, might really change what strategy I'm taking. Another fact here too, if I collect wood early, 2 wood give you a canoe. In the game, the cacao bean is not something that you can actually produce with resources. You just have to come by it. And the only way really to come by it is from a canoe, or sometimes with some of these tiles. And so if you can get one of these cacao beans early on in the game, it gives you access to some resources that are harder to get, and you can get them more quickly. So there's always some interesting decisions and strategies you can take. Another strategy that I see people have taken before is they really try and push wood and stone early so that they can move up on this track and start pulling more resources out of their bag sooner. That obviously gives you bigger turns earlier on in the game and allows you to do more all game long. In my setup here, again, these little market tiles, pushing for these early on could really give me a strategic advantage over somebody. Some of the resources become much easier to acquire with more of these tiles, and actually the last time I played, that's what I did. I had a very similar setup. I was able to get tiles and money really easily, and it gave me a lot of these tiles early on, and those tiles gave me a really big advantage. For mechanics, I give Altiplano a 9. Bag building is something that I don't see in too many games. One of the other big games that comes to mind is Quacks of Quedlinburg. That one I do feel like it is bag building, but it's also push your luck. This one isn't push your luck. But yeah, the idea behind bag building and kind of the way you have to manage your resources with your bag is really intriguing to me and really a fun concept. As you're building your bag and, trying to get certain resources to make certain things happen, there's kind of this balance between having too many resources of one type versus like, hey, I don't have enough of this. Like I have 7 wood, but I only have 2 stone. I really need to get to my stone. And so then what they allow you to do in the game is start getting rid of those resources and storing them in your storage. Once they're here, they're not usable anymore. And that actually, I think, opens the game up and makes it a little bit more strategic for you, because in that case, if you had 7 wood and 2 stone, the likelihood of getting your stone out as much as your wood obviously is low. And so when you store your wood, you've got more opportunity to get your stone out faster. And that really gives you some kind of control over the mechanics of the game a little bit. For overall satisfaction, I give Altiplano an 8. This is a game I enjoy coming back to. Like I said, I've played 6 or 7 times, and I always feel satisfied after I play. I often have an itch to play a game, and that itch often is not satisfied with kind of a small, lightweight game. And this, while I wouldn't consider it a heavy game, it definitely scratches that itch for me. One thing that I do feel like is kind of lacking a little bit is theme. In the game, you're playing in the South American highlands. You've got an alpaca. I mean, the theme really does shine through on the components of the game. I mean, it's obvious that you're in the South American highlands. You're making some carpet. You're collecting fish. All of those things. But I will say this is one of those games that you really could just reskin with a new theme, and it would work just as well. Now that may not turn you off at all. For me, I always love a game that has kind of a rich theme, but I still enjoy the game quite well, and that doesn't take a lot away from how I feel about the game. For replayability, I give Altiplano a 7. There's a little bit that they do for you that allows replayability to feel better. For example, each time you start, you'll start with a couple different goals each game, and those goals might push you one direction or another. You may choose to not fulfill those goals. And another part of the variation that you'll see is everybody will start with a different one of these tiles at the beginning of the game that will kind of push you a certain direction with what you're capable of as well. And then the other piece of replayability, of course, comes into play with these tiles. They're the same every game, but the order they come out changes. So it kind of adds a little bit of variation. And if you like bag building, then of course just that in itself makes the game more replayable. But as far as variation goes, there's not a great deal of variation from game to game. One last piece about replayability. Sometimes the tiles that you start with push you pretty hard to go with a certain strategy, and that might take away from either the replayability of the game for you, or potentially even what control you have and the agency you have over the game. While I did give this a pretty good rating on agency, that's something that could knock it down for you. For weight, I give Altiplano a 9. This game feels just right up my alley on weight. Again, it's not a heavy game. I would consider it a mid. It almost feels like the heavy side of mid with just enough moving pieces throughout the game that it scratches that itch for me. So with all 10 criteria out of the way, that gives Altiplano a total score of 83 out of 100. Not bad at all. I like Altiplano quite well, and I think it deserves that rating. And that is everything I've got for you today on Altiplano. Thank you for joining me. Let me know in the comments what you think about this ranking system I've put together. It is still really new, and some of the criteria may not feel like what you think makes for a good game. So yeah, let me know in the comments what you think. Are there any of the 10 criteria that I have that you dislike or disagree with? I weighted them all at 10 points each, and for you that might not be the same. You might think some of them deserve a heavier weight. I'm really interested to hear what others think about that. Thank you for joining me, and I will catch you all in the next one.